Welcome to the Telltale Cake, where we tell tales about books with cake, and we try to ignore the corpses underneath the floorboards. With me, visiting 3D and in person, all the way from Spain, we have my dear friend Saroya. Saroya, it's very odd talking to you in person, so could you maybe freeze randomly and then just go through what you were going to say, just sped up like a chipmunk?
What? Sure, I can do that.
Thank you. That makes me feel better and more at home.
I look different when I'm not in a little tiny box with my name at the bottom, right?
Very much so. You're even more attractive when you're not stuck in a tiny box.
You say all the right things.
That's why I'm so incredibly popular as a person.
Definitely.
So what are we reading today, and why are we reading it?
We're reading 1,000 Ships by Natalie Hayes.
Pointed at the camera? The camera's right there.
I was going to say, where is the camera?
That's the camera.
1,000 Ships by Natalie Hayes.
And why are we reading it?
Because it's a really good book.
You do a fabulous Vanna White, by the way.
I try.
It is a really good book. You picked this, and this is not the first fanfic of the Iliad that I've ever read, but it's one of the best.
It's the first one because you mentioned that this is not the first one you've read from the women's point of view either.
Correct.
It is the first one I have ever read from the women's point of view.
You've read Firebrand, though, right? By Mary
Oh, you're right.
Bradley?
I have.
It's not about all the women. It's largely about Cassandra.
Right.
But kind of that idea.
That's true. I forgot about that.
So I really liked this one. And on this show, we like to eat cake with our books. And the definition of cake is a little bit flexible. So because we're talking a lot about Greeks, we're eating spanakopita, which is kind of a pie, which is kind of a cake, so it's fine. I actually did not make this. I got this from a nearby restaurant because I'm very bad with phyllo pastry, or maybe phyllo pastry. I was starting with, I'm not even sure how to pronounce it, much less deal with it.
And I can't really help you there either.
So, that is very flaky and gooey and oily and all the things that we want spanakopita to be.
Butter, I think. Or olive oil.
Crumbs go everywhere.
And crispy.
Mm-hmm. I'm a fan of spanakopita.
Me too.
It's just such a nice way to enclose cheese and spinach.
I can pretend I'm healthy because it's spinach.
You can pretend you're healthy with anything. Chocolate is a bean.
Well, it's true. Well, chocolate, it helps your mood. So I consider it mental health.
And wine is a fruit. Nutrition.
It is definitely a fruit.
Nutrition is my passion.
Mine too. I try and get the 5 major food groups every day. Wine, chocolate, more wine, more chocolate, and carbs. I'm very much like Buddy the Elf.
Nothing wrong with that. I also like cheese.
Yeah. That's the other food group. Sorry. I guess instead of more chocolate, we'll have cheese.
Well, we shouldn't have it as an entire food group because a minority of the people in the world can actually digest milk in adulthood. But it's my favorite genetic mutation.
And I'm hoping that the oil will, moisturize my hands.
There you go. So, let's judge this by its cover. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'm very meh about this urn.
Yeah, it's just an urn. It's not the best.
It's such a boring urn, too. I work for a museum and libraries unit at a university. The director of museums will usually use as a background for his slides an actual Greek urn that is in the collection. So this has led me and my incredibly mature colleagues to play this fun game during meetings called Find the Naked People on the Urn. There's no naked people on this urn, so I kind of don't.
No, there aren't. There aren't even any warriors.
There's not even 1,000 ships. There's like
There's
two.
only 2.
I feel cheated. It's like 2 Millie Helens if we assume that, Helen is the face that launched 1,000 ships, then a Millie Helen is 1 ship.
Yeah.
So that's 2 Millie Helens.
That would make sense.
Math.
It's not for everyone.
True.
Very disappointing. And no naked people. Nobody, no warriors killing each other,
No, nothing.
which is totally what the book is about. And the author's name, by the way, is Natalie Haynes, not Hayes.
Thank you.
I couldn't remember.
So as we touched on, this is Iliad fanfic. And it's going to be the story of the Iliad and some of the Odyssey from the point of view of the women, and all the women, including, to my delight, the muse Calliope. Because as we know, the Iliad famously opens with something like Sing, O Muse of the Rage of Achilles, which is my favorite song. But we don't really hear much about women in the Iliad, even though it starts out with an invocation to a female goddess. It's a story that very much erases femininity and the role of women to a great extent. So I love that we start out with Calliope as a character complaining about the audacity of this dude Homer demanding that she sing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Who does he think he is ordering me around? Like, I'll sing if and when I feel like it.
and about what I feel like.
Right.
And she does, though. She goes through and gives this Homer dude the story of the women that feature in the Iliad, which is going to be about as depressing as you think it's going to be.
Yeah. Interestingly, though, and perhaps I'm the only one, I love mythology, all different kinds. So I think I read the Iliad in high school or something.
I actually like the Iliad.
Never thought of what actually happens to the people who survive a war on the losing side.
Or even the winning side, because
Well,
Clytemnestra is going to
true.
show up.
Yeah, that's true.
It is an omission that we have this story about what happens to all these warriors and how gloriously they all die. And it's pretty much silent about what happens to everyone left. Mm-hmm. It kind of reminds me of, World War I, where we hear a lot that an entire generation was killed in World War I for no real reason. Well, what about the other slightly more than half of humanity that is dealing with the fact that the other half just kind of died?
Right.
That doesn't come up so much.
Yep. Yeah. And I wonder if it's because it's the loser's story or because it's often the women's story.
Little bit of column A,
Or
a little bit
both.
of column B.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about some of the women. There's not so much of an overarching narrative. There's a little bit of one, but mostly it's just a series of vignettes about various women. We start off and finish rather quickly with Creusa, who is Aeneas' wife.
Mm-hmm. Somehow or other, I totally forgot that Aeneas was part of the Iliad. Once I heard it, I went, oh, yeah, that's right.
I read the Aeneid earlier this year, which was a terrible mistake. It's very boring. Don't read it. So I was aware of that. And in the Aeneid, Creusa just sort of vanishes when we all assume she's dead, but never figure it out. Well, Aeneas goes off to sleep with Dido, and then whatever the Roman woman's name is that starts a war about anyway. Who cares? No one cares about the Aeneid. So we have Creusa, and she dies trying to get out of Troy when it falls. And she also gives us a lot of plot exposition about the Trojan horse, which does not actually show up in the Iliad at all. It's sort of expanded on by Virgil, but she talks about being able to leave Troy for the first time
Right.
in 10
In
years.
10 years, yeah.
And just being barefoot and watching her kid play.
Mm-hmm.
And how nice that is.
Yeah.
And
And that her son had spent his whole life trapped inside the city.
these tiny walls. And that's when we talk about Chryseis, which actually we could talk about Chryseis now, that shows up in her story. She grows up inside the walls. She doesn't remember. So she doesn't really have any sort of sense about how odd this is or any ability to really analyze the risk of leaving the walls. I mean, she's just your average stupid teenager who's sneaking out at night to
Right.
go neck with some pretty shepherd boy that she met. And it just never really occurred to her how badly this could go.
Right. Right. And it did. It went very badly for her.
Indeed. And also for the Greeks, because her capture by Agamemnon and her father being a priest of Apollo, he calls down
The
plague.
wrath of the god.
You can always blame plagues on gods in Greek mythology, which is actually quite satisfying.
It is. It is. And usually it's their fault.
Yeah. Wouldn't it have been nice if we could have blamed COVID on God being angry at someone specific?
I'm sure somebody did that.
Well, yes.
I'm not sure who, and I'm not sure who the blamer or the blamee ended up being, but I'm sure somebody did that.
We need a Tiresias to go say some sooth about Oedipus and Jocasta or something like that.
Which is another one of my favorite stories.
Love Oedipus Rex, yes.
Talk about one that doesn't end well.
Not at all. Not for anyone.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the oratorio Oedipus Tex?
No.
It's a spoof of Oedipus Rex. It's set in Thebes Gulch, Texas, in which Oedipus Tex, whose friends just call him Ed, meets and marries Billy Jocasta, the queen of the rodeo.
Oh my God, that sounds awesome.
But then the town is plagued with plague. And
That sounds awesome.
it is wonderful. Highly recommend. It's by Professor Peter Schickele, who discovered it in the works of the forgotten PDQ bot.
Oh, how funny.
It's great. And I'm already digressing because this is just so depressing.
The first time I read it, I didn't actually think about it as depressing. I thought about it as, like, to me, it was just interesting and it was fascinating, and I was so happy to hear from these women who are all strong female characters, even Helen. And it's interesting because you never hear anything about Helen except that she was beautiful.
Her face launched 1,000
Right.
chips, which seems difficult on a face.
Yeah,
How much do you have to moisturize after
A
your
lot.
face launches 1,000 chips? Yeah.
a lot. So I thought it was really interesting to get to hear from her. And she even was a strong woman. And she was pretty well aware of what her fate was going to be, too.
I think Creusa is really depressing to me. Like, once we get past Creusa and meet some of the other women, especially we have a couple of cameos about the captured Trojan women who are hanging out on the beach, basically waiting to be divided up as slaves.
Right.
Yet Hecuba, Helen, and Hecuba's daughters, Polyxena, Cassandra, and then Andromache.
Andromache. Yeah.
They're all hanging out together. And there's this scene where they start trying to figure out whose fault this all is, which seemed almost funny to me because it seems like such a thing that women are trained to do.
Right.
Which is take the blame for stuff that men do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things that I like about this book, speaking of it being funny, one of the things that I really liked about this book and why I think it didn't hit me as being depressing is because there is a lot of humor in it. Some of it laugh out loud funny, Penelope,
Yes.
and a lot of it sardonic humor. There's a fair amount of sarcasm in there.
Yes. And part of the very sardonic humor is when some of the women are blaming Helen for what happened. She's like, why blame me? Why blame me and not Paris?
Uh-huh.
I had a husband, but you know what? Paris had a wife.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I really like that. She's like, wait a minute. There were two of us involved here.
And there were more than that. Hecuba talks about how she got a prophecy that they were supposed to kill Paris as a child, and starts blaming herself because she didn't kill her baby as a child, which I can totally understand not wanting to do that.
Right.
Just on the word of some random soothsayer. Like, if a soothsayer showed up and said I had to kill one of my cats to avert like the fall of the whole USA, I'd probably be like,
who are you?
And also, no.
Right.
Get away from me.
But yeah, you're right, because Hecuba talks about it's her fault because she couldn't bring herself to kill her baby. And somebody, I can't remember who, but somebody says, but wait a minute, Priam was the king, and he couldn't do it either.
And not only that, he welcomed in Paris when Paris showed up with Helen.
Right. Right, when he like randomly showed up after however many years. Hi, I'm here, I'm your son. And I've come to claim my place.
And Priam was like, okay, sure. And then when Paris went off to claim the most beautiful woman in the world, as was promised to him by Aphrodite, who is Aeneas' mother, just to make this a more complicated,
That's
messy
right.
story.
I forgot about that too.
Everyone's related. It's kind of like World War I. All the crowned heads are related to each other.
Yeah.
And speaking of, like, Helen is the daughter of Zeus after Zeus became a swan to get it on with Leda, because Zeus is just the original fuckboy.
Yeah. And when I was a kid, I read a lot of mythology. It never really clicked how nasty a lot of it is. I'm like, as an adult, when I go back and read the stories again, I'm like, that's disgusting. Like, to me, you know, like everybody do whatever they're into, but to me, like turning yourself into a swan.
Danae and the Golden Rain.
Yeah.
Yeah, ew.
That's a big ew.
I sort of imagined Zeus singing Oops, I Did It Again to this crowd of all the women that he's done it with, you know, Leda, Danae, Europa, Ganymede, Callisto, Io. I can't even keep track of them all.
I know.
Whose fault is this? Well, a bunch of people did this. A bunch of people set up a situation. But also, let's look at the Greeks who decided to go on this massive all-out war for one woman.
Right. I've often wondered about that. Like, dude stole my wife. Well, I'm not going to go bring a bunch of men to kill a bunch of people because you got marital issues. Like,
Yeah. How is this my
go to
problem?
counseling.
Seriously, take the hint. She don't want to be with you. I don't understand how this is anyone else's problem but yours.
Yeah. And I can totally see, like, okay, Agamemnon is Menelaus' brother, so I can totally see the brother going, dude, I'll come fight with you. But the whole rest of Greece, not so much.
I think it's Laodamia who comments that because Menelaus lost his queen, a whole lot of queens lost their kings.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Laodamia was also very sad. She was actually in love, which, given what marriage was in this time, is a little surprising to me. But she actually loved her husband, and when he was first one off the boat, which you should never be first in war. Just don't do it.
I think Menelaus should have been first off the boat, personally.
Yes, and Agamemnon.
Yep.
But no, it was Laodamia's husband, and he dies immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And she never gets over it.
Yep. Yeah, that was sad.
Although some of the women do get over it. Andromache does eventually.
Mm-hmm.
And good for her.
Yeah, and she actually had a more or less happy ending.
She did.
which was nice.
Yeah, she lost everything. Not only did Hector die and have his body dragged around the walls of Troy for a while, then when she was captured, her son Astyanax was thrown off the walls.
Yeah. Yeah. By Achilles' son, am I
Yes.
correct? Yeah.
And eventually she can't be sad and angry anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't really say, I think, what eventually happened to Hecuba.
It doesn't.
Odysseus takes her away to the king who betrayed her youngest son,
And
so she can get her revenge. But then it doesn't say what happened to her. Like, did he leave her?
that is an interesting question because I hope he left her because pretty much everybody dies who travels with Odysseus.
Right. I was thinking the same thing.
And I'm not sure what she had left for her after revenging.
Right. Yeah. So hopefully he left her with the blind king.
Hope so. And I hope her revenge worked out better for her than it did for Clytemnestra.
Yeah.
I've always been on Clytemnestra's side.
Me too. Me too, because every version of Agamemnon I have ever read or seen in a movie, he's a son of a bitch.
And he
And he
sacrificed
kills his own daughter.
just for good wins to go wage a giant war because his brother is having marital problems.
Right. Right.
How does any of this make sense?
It makes zero sense to me. So yeah, I've always been a fan of Clytemnestra. I'm like, yeah, I don't blame you.
Yeah, I'm like, okay. Killing Cassandra is maybe not the best thing you could have done, but
Yeah. I'm not even sure what her motivation for that was.
I'm not sure either.
They don't really go into that.
The impression, I read the Orestia by Aeschylus this year, and my impression there is it's just her killing Cassandra is sort of to make her out to be the evilest, bitchiest bitch who has ever bitched.
There we go. Yeah.
But that series of plays also culminates with this dramatic courtroom drama. The conclusion of which is that it's fine for Orestes to kill Clytemnestra, but not to avenge Agamemnon, but not for Clytemnestra to kill Agamemnon to avenge Iphigenia, because when men and women come together to create life, the spark that creates life comes only from the man. Women are just sort of a field that it grows in. For evidence, look at Athena, who grew out of Zeus, and there's no equivalent of someone just growing out of a female goddess. That is literally the clinching courtroom argument.
Wow.
That women are basically worthless and everything comes from
We're just
men.
petri dishes.
Yes, we are. We're incubators.
Wow.
So yeah, firmly on Clytemnestra's side.
Yeah, me too. And in this book, killing Cassandra was kind of a mercy.
Yes.
Because Cassandra was in a very bad place, like all the time.
She was. She was having, I guess, intrusive thoughts of the future and sometimes the past. She got cursed by Apollo for not wanting to put out because the gods, they are the petty.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So not only does he rape her, but he gives her what she asks for, which is the gift of prophecy. But the way he gives it to her, she's constantly hearing voices and seeing what's going to happen. And she's bombarded 100% of the time by all of this. So it basically drives her insane, I think.
And as is somewhat reasonable.
Right. Right.
And
Which makes you rethink any wish you might have had to know what happens in the future.
I have never had that wish.
Me either. Me either. I don't want to know.
I don't think it would help
No.
anything, ever.
No, assuming that you can't change anything that's going to happen, why would you want to know? Because all you're going to do is worry about it.
Although it might be possible to change the future. I mean, the soothsayer did warn about Paris, and maybe if they'd killed Paris as a baby, the whole war wouldn't have happened. But at the same time, Troy is over here, this incredibly rich city.
Mm-hmm.
Someone's eventually going to attack it, right?
Right. Yeah. And there was probably an underlying reason for that war, too, which very well was most likely economic.
I sincerely doubt the only reason was Helen and her face.
Yeah.
Spectacular as her face was.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure one man's ego is really worth that long of a war.
No. One would hope not. That's a long-ass war.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, 10 years of war and then 10 years for Odysseus to get home.
One of my favorite characters is Penelope.
Mine too.
She shows up periodically, having heard a new story about Odysseus from the bards, and most of her reaction is seriously.
So it's awesome. She is my favorite also. She shows up in a series of letters that she's writing. All but one she's writing to Odysseus. And she starts out by, "Oh, I'm so happy to hear the war is over and the Greeks have won and you were the intelligent one that came up with the idea for the horse and you're coming home after 10 long years and I've missed you so much and I can't wait to see you. Oh, your loving wife." And then the next letter, I think, is a year later, and she's starting to go, "Why aren't you home yet?
Everyone else is home.
Everyone else is home." And the bard came and said that you were doing something with some woman, and stop it and come home, please, because I've waited long enough and your son is also waiting for you. And then the next letter is a little more impatient. And it just progresses from there until you can tell she's about ready to kill him.
Why are you going through the underworld just because this woman you're sleeping with told you to? Which is a great question, frankly.
Right. And why are you sleeping with another woman, by the way? I mean, you're supposed to be on your way home to me.
You are my husband.
In case you have forgotten, which she says quite a few times. By the way, you have a wife.
Who is waiting for you.
Waiting for you.
You have a son who is not going to grow up knowing you. Get back here.
Yep. And the final letter she's writing to Athena, saying, "Thank you for bringing home this man who I think is my husband, but I'm really not 100% sure."
Because he did kind of show up and red wedding everybody who was in her hall. I mean, she had a lot of annoying suitors, but he didn't have to go through and murder everybody.
I know, right? He probably could have just shown up and said, "I'm back."
But he decides to murder everybody. And she's like, "Yeah, is this the same husband that I have?" I'm not sure.
Right. It's a valid point after 20 years.
I'm not the same person I was 20 years ago. And a lot has happened to both of them in the last 20 years.
But she is her letters grow increasingly snarky, and it's hilarious to see the trajectory where she's almost like, "I really don't care if you come home or not at this point, because I can take care of myself. So if you're not going to come home, just tell me.
Just keep hanging out with the nymph."
Fine. See if I care.
The other through line is from the gods, who are the pettiest, brattiest group.
Oh my God, they're terrible. If these are what people worship, y'all need to pick something better to worship, because they're awful. And the entire war started because Gaia was tired and had a conversation with Zeus because there's too many people and she can't support them all, which is a valid point.
Though it's a little ironic that she's talking to Zeus about it, because one of the reasons there's a lot of people is because Zeus can't keep his pants shut.
There is that. And so they go through all these different options for decreasing the population and finally come up with, let's have a giant war.
And it'll be fun for the gods because we can work out all of our little petty squabbles through mortals.
Right. And they're awful. They're awful. They're like petulant toddlers.
They are.
Give me my apple. It's mine. Dad, she took my apple. I want it back.
It's mine. It's marked the fairest.
Give it to me. Now.
So for some reason, they decide that Paris is the one who gets to decide which of them gets the damn apple.
Who was living like his best life as a shepherd because his parents didn't kill him when he was a baby. So he's living his best life as a shepherd married to a nymph.
Mm-hmm. Oenone.
Yep. And just having like the best time ever. And la-di-da-di-da. And all of a sudden, these three women show up.
And they're immortals. And as we've learned, immortals can be a little dicey. You don't want to misstep around them because while they're petty, bratty, awful people, they can kill you or curse you.
Right. Or turn
prophecy.
you into things.
Yeah, you don't want to piss off the immortal gods. So he doesn't want to piss off these immortal gods. Having three random goddesses show up and demand that you tell them which of them is the fairest, that's not a good idea with people. Like, what? If three people I didn't know showed up at my door and was like, tell us which one of us is the best looking, I'd be like, I don't want any part of this argument.
Right, no.
Nothing I say is going to make anyone happy.
Right. Two beings are going to be really pissed, no matter what the answer is. And that's 2-1, no.
And the answer is really just a matter of opinion anyway.
That's true.
And I don't know y'all. My opinion means nothing here.
Yeah.
Like, it's a stupid question to ask anyone, but for some reason they decide to ask Paris which of them is the fairest. So the goddesses start undressing.
Uh-huh.
Which, again, like, if you envision just three people you don't know showing up at your door and be like, which of us...
And take their clothes off and go, here, which one of us looks better naked?
It's like, can you not? I did not consent to this.
Although at least you can kind of figure that all three goddesses are going to be pretty good looking.
Yeah, even if like a bunch of underwear models showed at my door wanting to know who's the fairest, I feel like I don't necessarily want them undressing.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
I'd be like, so I just made my coffee. I've got to get to work. Can you not?
Yeah, go next door. Maybe they'll help.
Actually, my next door neighbor probably would be helpful.
He probably would. And he would probably make a very good choice, too.
Yeah, and also, he's a very tactful guy, so I think he would. I think he would be better equipped to handle the situation than me. Paris eventually chooses Aphrodite because,
well, she's Aphrodite.
Yeah, she's the goddess of beauty. She promises him like the most beautiful woman in the world. After her, of course.
Right.
And the other goddesses actually point out, well, Helen has a husband. Aphrodite's like, well, come to that. Paris has a wife.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole stupid reason, supposedly, this whole thing started.
Right. Because of some petty jealousy about this stupid apple.
It makes even less sense than the Archduke Francis Ferdinand getting shot and millions of people dying.
Yeah.
Like, that I at least semi-get why that happened.
Right.
This makes zero sense.
Yeah. And the more you read it, the less sense it actually makes. It doesn't become clearer the more you read Greek mythology.
It just makes less sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It becomes much more like, what the hell?
What are y'all
What are you
doing?
thinking?
What is your deal?
Grow the fuck up.
The person that I think probably has the best head on her shoulders is Antenor's wife, whose name is escaping me this precise second. Theano. So Antenor is not much of a character in the Iliad or the Aeneid. He doesn't really show up until a later text about the fall of Troy, and then Dante picks him up and identifies him as a traitor who threw open the gates to the Greeks.
Right.
Because when I read this, I was like, who is this?
Right.
Now, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me that there's even a traitor character, given the whole situation with the horse. There's already Greeks inside the city. Like, you don't need a Trojan to
Right.
go open the gates.
Yeah, because I always thought that the ones inside the horse got out of the horse and opened the gates.
That is, I feel like, the reasonable thought. But apparently, according to Dante and somebody else, it was this dude Antenor. And in Thousand Ships, Natalie Haynes has his wife Theano urging him to do this in order to get clemency from the Greeks in order to get out, which works. And I'm kind of oddly okay with that morally, because the horse is already in the city. I mean, I know we're all supposed to hate traitors just as a human taboo, but from a social contract standpoint, Priam has already betrayed the city by bringing Helen in and not doing any negotiations to end the war. And now they're in a situation where it's
Good point.
if he's doing this thing to get clemency from the Greeks. Granted, he doesn't know this, but the Greek warriors are already in the city. Everyone's going to die. It kind of doesn't matter what he does.
Right.
So why wouldn't you take the action that lets you live at this point and your family live?
Yeah, that is a good point. That is a good point.
I don't know that there's anything at that point to gain by blind loyalty.
Right, right. And speaking of Priam accepting Paris and Helen, surely the man was not stupid. And surely he must have known there would be consequences.
And at some point during the 10 years, surely there could have been negotiations to return Helen.
Yeah. If this is what you're here for, here.
Yeah. Go. Because this is not really worth basically the lives of everyone in the city.
Right.
And the capture and slavery of all the women and children. Because I think what this book makes a great point is dying gloriously and heroically in battle is kind of the easy way to be the loser in a war.
Yeah, yeah. When you read about what the women go through, that's a really good point.
We talk about Briseis and Chryseis, who are some of the major catalysts for stuff. These are actual human women who are prizes that cause this whole infighting and plague stuff to go on between Achilles and Agamemnon.
Right.
So women aren't people in this.
No, this book is very direct about pointing that out, that the women have absolutely no choice, no say, no decision in their futures, that they are completely at the mercy of men.
I think that's what makes it really so ironic and sad that the women are sitting on the beach trying to discuss whose fault it is among them.
Right.
It's like, you guys are the people who have the least amount of power and control over anything.
Right.
Now, one woman who does have some power is Oenone. She's a nymph. And I love her.
And Paris's wife.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because after the fall of Troy, he comes crawling back after having started a war that has killed his entire family, destroyed an entire city, destroyed all the villages around the city.
Right. And that was pretty much his fault.
Yeah. He's also destroyed the lives of a whole bunch of Greeks through this. But he, after doing all this just to get with a beautiful woman, he comes crawling back to his wife, and he's wounded, and he's like, well, you're a magic nymph. Can you heal me? And she's like, well, yes, I can, but I'm not going to.
Right.
And she just lets him die, and I think that's lovely.
Yeah, because where have you been the last 10 years, by the way?
You abandoned me.
Yep. So I hope it was worth it.
There are some very satisfying moments.
There are. There's definitely some karma. in there. And I think that's another reason that I didn't find it depressing. Because there was enough karma in there to where you kind of go, yes.
It is in some ways very
Not
satisfying.
that I would celebrate anybody suffering or dying, but sometimes you still go, yes.
There's some people that I just can't feel bad about.
Yeah.
Paris is one of them.
Paris is one of them. Agamemnon's another.
I can feel bad about Iphigenia.
Iphigenia, definitely. Achilles' friend / cousin,
Patroclus. / roommate / gay lover.
Yes.
Patroclus.
Yes. Him, you feel kind of bad about.
I think I feel more bad about him because I've read another book of The Song of Achilles that is from Patroclus' point of view, and there's a lot of hot sex. But he's a very likable character.
Yeah.
He's always kind of a likable character. Now, are there any other women whose stories we really want to touch on?
I'm not sure. I think we've hit the highlights.
That's what I'm thinking of, too. Do we want to mention Penthesilea?
Oh, yeah, we should. I forgot about her. She's an Amazon, and her sister is the really famous one.
Hippolyta.
That's the one. And she goes to fight Achilles.
She does, which is not something that men really do.
Right.
Because he's Achilles.
Right.
He's invincible except for his heel.
Yep. And unfortunately, she ends up getting killed.
Yeah, it's pretty much instantaneous, too.
Yeah. But yeah, she was pretty awesome. And talking about the Amazons.
Yes.
And
because it is this group of nomadic women with power.
Yeah. So that was pretty awesome. There's more strong women in there. It was very sad about Penthesilea and Hippolyta.
It was, because Penthesilea accidentally killed Hippolyta.
Yeah.
And she went off on a journey to basically off herself because suicide is kind of frowned on. So she just does suicide by Achilles, basically.
Right, exactly.
Which I feel like there's, maybe worse ways, but still wouldn't really recommend it.
No, me either. And also, Achilles getting the credit for killing the Amazon queen is something he really doesn't need.
No, he doesn't need
He doesn't need more glory and more credit. He's got enough. And in this book, he's a very unpleasant person.
He is.
In the movie Troy, he was very much more sympathetic, but of course he was also Brad Pitt.
Maybe I should watch that.
It's actually a really good movie. Agamemnon is still a son of a bitch.
As he should be.
As he should be. Achilles is a pretty sympathetic character. Briseis has a fairly large role.
Interesting. What about Chryseis?
I don't remember Chryseis in it at all.
Okay.
And let's see. Let me think. Menelaus is basically Menelaus.
Nobody ever cares about Menelaus.
Paris is Orlando Bloom, so he's almost as pretty as Helen. Peter O'Toole is Priam, which is pretty freaking awesome.
Nice. So, I think we've hit all the highlights. We sort of wrap up hearing from the muse Calliope again, talking about how she didn't give the poet what he really wanted, which is one grand epic story. It's like lots of little stories. Not just the women, but all the women.
Right.
All these people. And I like Calliope.
I liked her a lot. She was probably my second favorite after Penelope.
I would agree with that. She also made the poet cry at one point. Because he just wanted glory, and she was like, "You're gonna hear."
He wanted blood and swords and battles and glory and death and honor, and she's giving him all the women's stories.
Which does include death, but it's not these grand...
Right, but not honor and glory.
It's just people dying because of stupid men.
Yep.
So I think the time has come for us to rate this on my unitless sugar scale. So, of course, the S stands for sexiness.
I would say it's not very sexy. And
It's
what
none.
sex there is pretty much is rape,
Yeah, there is.
which isn't sex.
No, it is absolutely not sex. We do talk a little bit about Chryseis and her pretty shepherd boy, but then he gets murdered.
Yeah.
And which is so sad. She just wanted to sneak out of the city and be making out with her pretty shepherd boy.
Yeah.
Which I feel like is something you ought to be able to do as a teenager. It should just be something you can do. Use protection and nothing.
Right.
It doesn't really hurt anything. It's fine. Uniqueness is what the U stands for. I won't say this is terribly unique. Again, I've read like a number of Homer fanfics recently. Song of Achilles, Circe, Firebrand, the Aeneid. But this is different in that it's about all of the women, not just a woman.
Right. Right. So I would give it the U for being about all the women. And it was very good about being from each woman's perspective, too, not just telling us what happens to them, but actually letting them each speak in a way. And also, it has a very feminist take,
It does.
which I really liked.
And part of that is not only do we hear from different women's perspective, all the women have different perspectives and they have different goals and different choices because women are not the Borg. And one of the reasons I am a feminist is because I want women to have choices. Like Laodamia's wanting to stay home and make babies with her pretty husband is just as valid a choice that she should have been able to make as Penthesileia's being a strong Amazon queen.
Right.
It's okay for women to be different.
Right. Right. Yeah, we actually are.
The G is for gender, and it feels trivial to even bring this up because it is very strongly about women in a very male-dominated narrative.
Right.
A very patriarchal, misogynistic narrative.
Yep.
In which Briseis is literally a prize that when it's taken away from him, Achilles just goes to sulk in his tent with his cousin, roommate, boyfriend.
Right. I'm not going to fight anymore. Fine.
I'm just going to go do loot and chill with Patroclus.
Fine.
I swear, it's like the goddesses and their damn apple. It's mine.
Uh-huh. And I want it back.
People and their stuff and their pettiness. The A stands for axiness. Franz Kafka says that a book should be an axe for the frozen sea inside us. It should make us think about the world in a different way or affect us emotionally. Do you feel like this book was an axe?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Like I said, for me, the first time I read this, it's the first time I've seen Greek mythology told from the women's point of view. So it definitely made me think about what the hell does happen to the losers who are still alive at the end of a war.
What even happens to the victors who are still alive at the end of the war?
Right. But the ones who had no control over the war.
Right. What happens?
Yeah.
And we still don't know. We still don't know exactly what happens to Hecuba.
Right.
It does really make you think. Finally, we have readability. And I think we both listened to the audio version of this. Actually, I know we did because our library has 2 copies of this in audio form. And we told a friend that she should read it too. And she was like, well,
We'll wait for one of the copies to come back.
she was like, yeah, both the copies the library has are checked out. And we were like,
And we looked at each other and went, oops.
that would be because of us.
So the first time, this is the second time that I've read the book. The first time I read the Kindle version. The second time I did the audiobook, which is narrated by the author.
And she does a really good job.
She does a very good job.
Sometimes authors are not the best readers,
Correct.
which is not a dig. It's 2 different skills.
Right.
But she did a great job reading it, especially as Penelope.
Penelope. And Calliope.
Yeah.
Or as she pronounces it, Calliope.
I don't speak Greek. I know the musical instrument
Is a calliope.
which is why I'm saying it that way.
Me too, because that's...
But I really enjoyed listening to her read it.
Me too.
Yeah, the increasing sass and irritation of Penelope.
That was priceless.
Went really fast. I really enjoyed listening to this.
Yeah, me too. And the first time I read it, I was hooked from the beginning. I was like, this is awesome. Must read more. Must read more. Must read more. And I zipped through it in like a couple of days.
And
then I wanted more. I was like, no, don't end. I want more.
Well, Natalie Haynes has written some other books, like one from the point of view of Medusa.
I have that one. I just checked it out.
So
Stone Blind.
So am I going to have to wait for you to finish it?
I guess so. Sorry.
The problems with using the same library.
No, it's terrible.
But I am looking forward to reading that after you because I really enjoyed Natalie Haynes' writing and I want to read more. I have decided that we're going to try ending our show by making a bibliomantic prediction for our readers to help them know the future for the next month. Now, traditionally, the bibliomantic texts are the Bible and the Aeneid. For this, we're obviously going to use the Aeneid. So if you could flip through it and randomly point to a passage.
Okay. That.
Okay. Made league with him, or when he made league with him through hospitable rites after his death, the Rutulian War obtained it. So I would say that means do friendly things with people.
Yeah.
Be a good friend the next month.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do some hospitable rites. What does that mean? Does that mean you offer somebody a drink when they come in your house?
Of course. Doesn't everybody do that?
I would think. But if you don't, you should always offer people drinks when they come into your house.
Definitely. Say, welcome here.
Saroya, thank you so much for coming and talking to me about 1,000 Chips.
Thank you for having me. It's a lot of fun to actually see you outside the little box with your name at the bottom.
You're so much bigger in person.
You are too. And much deeper, might I add.
I have 3 dimensions.
You do. You do. It's amazing.
As humans are, 3-dimensional. Is there anything you would like to tell our readers to do or read?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head, except do lots and read lots.
You heard it here. Do lots, read lots, and when you're doing things, like and subscribe.